And we're live once again. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Solvable Mysteries Podcast. My name is Juras. As every week, I'm joined by my co host, Glenn Highcove. Man, are you excited to talk about this really mysterious and creepy case tonight?
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting too because I think we have one of our viewers, one of our fans who suggested this to us. So it's I think we owe it to that person for letting us know about this case. And then it turns out this is a really interesting and tragic case to think about.
Exactly, man. Well, I personally knew about this case actually way before we even started this podcast, and it always was really creepy to me because of the visual assets that we have in this case. So, a few things to mention here before we get into this case. I would like to thank all of the new subscribers to this podcast. We really appreciate all the new listeners, and we see more and more of you guys every week tuning in. So that really motivates us to keep doing these shows and even making better and better production and things like that in the future in terms of audio and whatnot. One thing to mention here is that this case has a lot of really interesting visual assets, and I'm assuming most of you guys will probably want to jump to our YouTube channel. I'm talking to everyone who's listening to this podcast on the podcast apps on, Stitcher, podcast, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, wherever, like wherever, they're all over the place at this point. Everyone who's listening on those apps, I suggest you jump into this case on our YouTube channel because we will showing a lot of interesting stuff. And I think you really have to show certain images in this podcast to tell the picture. So this is the one thing I wanted to mention. Another thing to mention is here is that actually over this week we got like another like 4 or 5 really interesting case suggestions. So guys, thank you for the suggestions. You're really making our lives a lot easier when you do the case picking and we do the research and then we talk about it. That actually works really well for us. But actually this case that we have looked into, I didn't really realize what kind of a cult following it had and that it could potentially do really well, given the fact how other podcasts did with this case. I'm really baffled why we haven't done this case for so long because it's literally one of my all-time favorite cases. Obviously, not because the girls died or anything like that, because there's a lot of visual assets, and I really think this is solvable. So I wouldn't put it past us to go back to this case even next week and go into the other details that we want to talk about, because this week we're just going to be talking about the cases like I don't know, more general information and what happened. And obviously, if we have enough interest, we'll be returning to this case again for sure, because there's a lot to talk about here. And I will say a little bit of a different format this week because we do have a really big case. I'm sure both of us are fans of this case for a while. Well, at least I was a fan of this particular case for a very long time. I'm pretty sure that you weren't sort of aware of this case at least as much as I have been. So for this, I guess, week, and I would actually see subsequent weeks, we have a little bit of a different plan in going into the podcast. We will be doing at least 2 episodes related to the same case. One of our commenters really heavily suggested this case to us, and it's a really fresh case. So we might even get some new information in the meantime. So this week, we're going to be talking about the Delphi murders, and then next week as well, I assume. So, dude, you want to give us a little premise about the whole situation and sort of introduce the case and how are we going to like sort of treat this case on our podcast this week?
Yeah, so this is a really fascinating case. I had not heard of it for some reason. Again, it seems to be the running gag on our show is that there's all these famous cases that I've never heard of. But here we are, and when I started digging into it, I was really amazed about just the level of tragedy and also how much it echoes some of the things we've already talked about. So most recently, I think this extends our show from last week about Asha Degree. So my premise last week was that, for whatever happened, in that case, the thing I think that I found so disturbing, on top of someone running away from their home, or a child being in some kind of strange situation, was that things could go wrong so fast, and sort of this random occurrence of someone taking advantage of, let's say, children or teenagers, someone almost like a hawk, just waiting for someone to be vulnerable and seizing on that moment to do something awful. And I think that's what's interesting here is we are going to talk today about two young ladies who were, I mean, easily just really great people, great interests, very healthy interests and lives, very good friendship. Um, and they had their whole lives ahead of them, and they had very promising futures. And they were in what should have been some of the best years of their lives, only years from being adults. And, they're living in a place that you don't really expect that there would be any danger or hazard. Yet, the moment that they were vulnerable on what was a very nice day, somebody totally unexpectedly took advantage of them and, ruined their lives. And I think the other thing that's going to be very interesting about this is how frustrating it can be when, in this modern day and age, when you have a case like this, that you have digital evidence, you have a video, you have a sound clip. We know what this person looks like. We know what this person sounds like. We know when they did what they did. We know who it happened to, who the crime happened to. We know a lot of things. The police know more. And yet it has been 3 years and this case has not yet been solved. So I think this is going to be a very interesting introduction today to the case of the Delphi murders.
Exactly, dude. And today we are going to be talking about, the mysterious Delphi murders. Why I'm saying that they are mysterious? Well, obviously because, 3 years had passed at this point and we still don't know what had happened, to the two young girls, Abigail Williams and Liberty German, who were discovered near the Man on High Bridge Trail, which is part of the Delphi Historic Trails in Delphi, Indiana, United States. After the two young girls had disappeared from the same trail the previous day. Now, the murders have received significant media coverage because of a photo and audio recording of an individual. And actually, in 2019, the police department released a video as well, of about 1 second, that, the guy who was a suspected perpetrator of, these murders, now he's known as the bridge guy. So we have the video of the bridge guy, we have the audio of the bridge guy, we have a still footage of the bridge guy, we have two sketches of the bridge guy, but we still don't know who he is, pretty much, because I'm strongly leaning towards that the bridge guy actually did it, and I'm thinking this is just a formality. Now we will need to find out who the hell is bridge guy in the first place. Now, despite thousands of tips that have been sent to the police and the circulation of the recordings of the suspect, no arrests in the case have been made, so that's also quite unfortunate. And yeah, dude, I know that you have in the background, in the shared file that we have, you have a few details to mention about the girls before we actually, I don't know, jump into the actual event. You want to take it over a little bit and talk about the girls and their backgrounds just a little bit?
Yeah, so, they're both two very, very nice girls, young ladies, really. They were both in the 8th grade. They were, very good friends. I would argue they were best friends. Um, and they both came from loving families. Now, I think for at least one of them, the family was a little bit non-traditional in that, let's just give their names real quick. So there's two girls. one girl's name is Liberty German, and she is 14 years old. She's known as Libby, and she is outgoing, athletic, known to be quite strong. And if you see a picture of her, she definitely looks strong. She was a photographer. She was very into baking. Interestingly, her grandparents had been her guardians since she was 3 years old. So her grandparents were very much in her life. And Libby was also known to be very outgoing, like very much, I guess, kind of an extrovert. And it's interesting because the other young lady in this case, Abigail Williams, known as Abby. So you have Libby and you have Abby. Abby is slightly younger. She looks a little bit younger too. She's 13 years old. She's shy. She's a budding artist. She's also a photographer. She's into drawing. The photos they have of both of these young ladies, I think, really tell a story into themselves. A picture's worth 1,000 words, and I think you really get a sense of their personalities from these pictures. I'll say, Abby really does look shy in her photos, but she looks like a really nice kid. Libby does look like a very outgoing, very smiling all the time. They said that Libby, she was always asking what she could do for somebody. She was always asking how could she help. So, I think this is what makes this a little bit of a heartbreaking part of the case, or a lot bit of a heartbreaking part of the case is, you really, when you find out about these two young ladies, you really like them. And then here's the other part is they were both very interested in true crime and forensic science. I mean, they could have been fans of ours if they, lived until, when we started our show. I mean, the odds are at some point they probably would have listened to our show, given, they had a deep amount of thought about this topic. And I think it was Libby that wanted to be FBI agent. So it's interesting, and it's unfortunately ironic. And the town they're living in is Delphi, Indiana. Population is not even 3,000 people. So that's definitely a small town. Demographically, crime-wise, it's not the safest part of Indiana, but it's far from the most dangerous. And Indiana is not known as a very high crime state. It's got about half of the violent crime rate of the rest of the state. So, I think it's a town where your expectation is that, you're not going to have violence happen to you. Yeah, especially when you look at sort of other aspects of the town. And so one of the things Delphi has that, every town has its thing that it likes to be proud of, right? And it's kind of funny being from a big city like Los Angeles, where you get so spoiled with all these major attractions and Disneyland and, art museums and Dodger Stadium and beaches and all these things, hiking trails, mountains. But every place can't be Los Angeles. And sometimes the simplest pleasures, I'll argue, I mean, I feel this way. Sometimes I actually like to go someplace else and just enjoy something that's nice someplace else. And sometimes something simple and not crowded is way better than something that's everybody really wants to go to, but then you go there and it's you went to a train station. So, I definitely understand this. So one of the places that is really special is this hiking trail area that's local to Delphi, and they have a bridge called, I think it's pronounced Monon High Bridge over Deer Creek, and it's over in the woodlands in remote Deer Creek Township. And apparently this area is really popular because this bridge is special. It's special because it's interesting for a lot of ways. What it was is an old rail bridge, and it was built in 1891. It was abandoned in 1987, and some of these factoids I'm getting from good old Dr. Grande, who managed to cover this topic a whole 6 hours ahead of us. We think someone must be spying for him. Yeah. Because we have been planning this episode for 2 weeks, and 6 hours before we record this, he comes out with a recording, and so, well, you know what? Let's make lemonade out of lemons, because it really did us a favor in terms of extra research and having his opinion. Because I was actually looking to see if he'd covered this before when we were doing the research, and then lo and behold, he covers it right before we do. So we had a chance to get his opinion. So some of his research said that actually a train had not crossed this bridge since 1929. So I don't know why it took them until 1987 to abandon the bridge and just stop, owning it. But maybe they were hoping it would come back at some point. Who knows? It is, from my other research, it is the second highest bridge in Indiana. They think this isn't officially confirmed, but it's been multiple people think this. It is 63 feet high, which I think I calculated was something like 18 or 19 meters for those of you on the metric system. Um, and it's super dangerous. It's rotting. It actually sways in the wind. There's a creek underneath it sometimes when it's not all dried up or frozen. But like, believe me, if you fall off a 63-foot bridge, like that creek is not deep enough to, preserve you. And frankly, when you fall off of something that high anyway, unless you fall perfectly, there's a good chance of getting seriously injured or killed. So because of this, it is actually illegal to walk across this bridge. And this bridge, this whole kind of scenic area is a favorite for like graduation photos and wedding photos. I have a park like that, actually not that far from me. It's a really beautiful park. And like, no joke, especially, at least before the current lockdown stuff going on, you would always see a wedding there every week, multiple weddings every weekend of just people coming there after the wedding to take their photos because it's so scenic. So I understand what they're talking about with this place, but it's like a super normal thing apparently to walk across this dangerous bridge. No joke. Even when I was watching some of the news stories, I saw like other adults walking across the bridge with like little tiny children, and this is like not. It doesn't have guardrails. It's it's pretty wacky. So we'll get into more about the bridge, but regardless, what happens is Libby and Abby, they have a sleepover. They're hanging out, doing the best friend thing, having a good time, sharing interests, doing their art and their baking. Libby was about, I think, to start softball, like an official softball team. And like I said, she had a strong athletic background. So this is going to come into play later in the story about, how did this happen to such a strong person? And they have a sleepover, and the next day, it's kind of like, it's funny. It was interesting, I should say. It almost reminds me of like the winter days here in California, where it's Indiana, and they had kind of a especially warm winter day, where like it could have been spring almost. It was so nice out, sunny, clear, and they say, you know what, we're gonna go and do this hike. And I think because the area is pretty low crime and this is a normal thing, they're going to do it together and not have any adult supervision. So Libby's sister, older sister Kelsey, who's old enough to drive, dropped them off at the trailhead on County Road 300 North, which is west of the Hoosier Heartland Highway. And the whole, had they made the whole hike, you and I were kind of debating back and forth whether this is a long hike or not. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's like about just short of a mile and a half, so 2.3 kilometers,
Yeah.
almost exactly for those.
And if I could just jump in for 1 second, I just want to bring us into the Google Earth right now, just so that our audience could have like a better understanding of what we're talking about. So just as you tell us the story, I'm just gonna sort of be showing the visual side of the show on the Google Earth. So as you've said, like somewhere in between 1:30 p.m. and 1:45 p.m., Abigail and Liberty were dropped off at this particular point that you can see in the map. And yeah, as you've said, like the actual trail, as you can see, like we are showing now a yellow line. Well, pretty much this is the area. This line sort of follows the trail that the girls were moving through. So as you can see, the trail at this point splits off into two places. So I assume they took the left. They turned left when they walked into that wooded area. And this yellow line here, I'm assuming this is like the whole trail. We sort of measured it at what, like 1.2, 1.3 miles, and for the kilometers, I think it was like what, 2,000 and 2.2 kilometers or like 1.3 miles or something like that, right?
Yeah, it was like, so I think you were just short of 2.3 kilometers, and that translates to about 1.42 miles. Let's just call it a mile and a half. Just to, this include, a couple extra footsteps in there maybe. And yeah, so, I don't know. I mean, I have to say there's a lot of hiking trails like that are nearby me that are about as long in between parks or up in the hills here. This is, Indiana's a pretty flat state relatively. Not like I don't think there's a lot of mountains and stuff. So, um, watch somebody will call me on that in the comments and tell me, oh no, we have the biggest mountain ever. Anyway, yeah. So they were going to go and, do this hike, and they were very into, they're like modern teenagers, right? So they love their social media. They have their phones, which is going to be important. They're doing their Instagramming. It's a perfect place for Instagramming, right? It's really scenic. It's a beautiful day.
Snapchat, I
Right in
think.
the yeah, Snapchat. Sorry, yep, Snapchat. Right in the middle of winter. They're getting their social media on. Just like, I mean, what a great age, right? To be doing this. To be at an age where you're starting to have some power in your life, and you have modern technology, and it's a nice day, and you're living a good life, and the future looks bright. And they're walking across this bridge. They're Snapchatting themselves on the bridge. Libby actually, one of the last photos they have is Libby posting a photo of Abby walking across the bridge, and that literally is the last image
Could we,
that anybody. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
step in here for 1 second? So this happened at 2:07 p.m. somewhere,
207. Yeah,
2:07 p.m. I'm sorry, 2:07 p.m. From what now on the visual assets we could pretty much see the image, and I'm sure you can see it as well. Now this is, I'm assuming, a Liberty German is taking a picture of Abigail, right? Because it says on the top left corner, Liberty German just took this picture like 7 hours ago. I mean, that's just how Snapchat works. I never used Snapchat, but I think it's all of the Snapchat features are now in Instagram, so I'm pretty familiar, I think, with what Snapchat is. But at this point, let's remember, somewhere, do you see like the trail going way back, right? Dude,
yeah.
bridge guy is already there somewhere.
Uh,
A lot of people say that we can actually see bridge guy from this particular Snapchat, but we actually can't. That's what I've looked into. There's like this darker area in the back. I'm not sure if you can see it. Some people are saying that that's potentially bridge guy. I don't think that Bridge Guy is any seen here, but I do believe that Bridge Guy, like if we would just somehow go a little bit back into the trail, I think Bridge Guy is already there. So that's pretty crazy to think about. That's pretty creepy. That's why I said that this case is one of my
yeah.
favorite ones to just like analyze, cause goddamn, this is some creepy stuff, yo.
And I think here's a good place to kind of think about things for a second, because these two young ladies, they were not foolish or naive. Somebody might, let's just play devil's advocate. Once in a while, someone will come along and they want to blame the victim, and they say, "Oh, these two little girls playing on this dangerous bridge." But like, yeah, it is a dangerous bridge. By the way, if these had been my daughters, I would not have been happy about them being on this bridge. So I'll just say that I'm not super happy about anybody walking on this bridge. But apparently, it's a thing everybody does. So I don't know if it's like an acceptable risk for people in that town. Maybe no one's ever fallen off of it. So maybe the odds, the conditional probabilities are such that no one's going to fall off of it in everybody's mind. But whatever reason, there's a book called Gift of Fear, which I think is Gavin DeBecker. It's a really great book, and one of the things he says is, don't let anybody guilt trip you into, feeling afraid about things or nervous about things. Like, you have these instincts for a reason, and they had their instincts. So when they see a man, this is all kind of, this is what we know from investigators after the fact, from some of the behaviors that the investigators have revealed to us. They haven't revealed to us everything, but they have revealed that from what they can tell, it seems like both Abby and Libby were getting apprehensive that a man seemed to be following them. And they
Yeah.
know this, yeah, because there's some recordings. There's some recordings that don't seem to be part of the normal social media posting that they were doing. There were some recordings that almost looks like um, Libby, I think it is, specifically, had been maybe trying to gather evidence. Maybe she hoped she would still be alive to show that evidence to somebody. But yeah, it seems like their radar was up because like any smart young ladies in today's world, wherever you live, you have to watch out for creepos. And
Exactly. I
yeah,
think, dude, I think it's a good time for me to show us, the footage that has been released in 2019. So, last year, because at first, let's just talk a little bit about this thing. At first, we only had this image right here that you could see, I'm sure. This is what we had. We had like a still image of a dude that was captured, and people were sort of at first thinking, is this part of a video? Is this a picture that Liberty took? What is this, like we had like sketches of a guy, but at first no one really knew if this was a video, if this was a picture. Now in 2019 we actually did got a video release, so let me just quickly put that video on for us while we talk. I think it will play into what you have to say next, right? So let me just play the bridge guy walking video. I have it on loop pretty much. So we could just sort of look at the bridge guy walking. So this was part, as you could probably see the, just assure me that you could see the footage as well, man. Can you see
oh
it?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
definitely.
the one thing I want to say here is that we could see a bridge guy walking for 1 second here. Now he is walking in a really strange manner. I'm assuming because the sort of trail is, it has like tiles, and in between those tiles there's like literally nothing, and like the spaces between the tiles is crazy big, almost like you could. I'd be too scared to even walk that probably. So that's, yeah,
Railroad ties.
yeah,
It's actually ties. Yeah, ties. So the
ties,
ties
yeah.
ties are the wooden. Anybody who's seen the old timey, like, we've seen railroad tracks. Railroad ties are the wooden slat boards that kind of hold the rails a certain amount, apart from each other, because that's how
Yeah,
trains work, right? And that's, yeah. I mean, and this thing is like, you know, more than 100 years old. I mean, it's
exactly.
crazy. Yeah.
And one other thing I wanted to mention here is, just to get to the like psychological part of the FBI and the police investigation a little bit. At first, they only release us like the image, right? They don't release us the footage of them of the bridge guy walking, because at this point, let's admit that everyone's believing that the bridge guy probably is responsible for the murders of Abby and Libby. At first they only released us a still image. Now why I think they did that is because they messed up, and then they were like, yo, let's release the whole video out, like the 1 second video, because people might think, why are they not releasing any more, because there is information that the police has not released regarding this case. I believe that the police sort of can't show us any more of the bridge guy. It's been 3 years at this point. I think if they had something more, they would definitely show us. I believe Liberty was actually filming him a little bit here, but she was doing in such a manner that the bridge guy didn't notice the phone, because let's say bridge guy did end up killing both girls, he manages to leave the phone on one of their bodies. That's definitely a wrong move. If you're a potential killer, you definitely don't want to leave potential evidence of you on the phone. So I think Liberty was filming him in such a manner that the bridge guy didn't even notice the phone. And look at him, he looks like a dude that could like miss details like that. He doesn't look like a professional hitman to me. Now one thing to mention here is, I think that literally, as you can see, like in this sort of loop of the footage that we have on the left side, you sort of see like a black little bar like showing up every like 2 or 1 second or something like that. I think that's when Liberty actually turns around. So I'm thinking this is literally the only footage we have of him, because there's no other footage out there. I think if we sort of had the full video, I would think Liberty would just sort of like turn away or something like that and just put the phone in her pocket, because we actually also have an audio clip. So I just want to play the audio clip while this is looped, and then I will bring us back in, and then you could continue on with the story. But I just thought that it's a good time to sort of put these assets out. So now let's listen in to what the police actually released, because they also released a little audio clip of this, I guess, video that was taken by Liberty German. So let's just listen in, guys.
Guys, downhill. Guys, downhill. Guys, downhill. Guys, downhill. Guys, downhill. Guys, downhill. Guys, downhill.
So that's pretty much the bridge guy saying, guys, muffle sounds, down the hill. Guys, down the hill. Guys, down the hill. And he says it in a really middle America type of a voice, if you know what I mean. So that's all we literally have, like the audio of the bridge guy saying guys down the hill, and 1 second of the bridge guy sort of walking in an awkward manner down the bridge. So yeah, man, I will let you continue on. I just wanted to add this information into the show.
So yeah, it's perfect, because what we're going to do is we're going to say what happens, what we know happens after this, or at least the sequence of events, and then we're going to rewind and we're going to look really closely. But it's pretty ominous, right? Like this is the last thing they see, or the last thing we see that we know about, and sounds like someone telling them to go down the hill, right? And that doesn't sound good. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what made them do that? What made them go? How did he coerce them into doing that? But here's where things get a little vague for us, because unlike the John Bonet case where the police lost control of the whole scene and the communication of information right away, the police, for reasons that we'll talk about in a little bit, are actually being very careful about what information we know about. And, I think there's some pretty good reasons why they're doing that. But what we do know right now, before we talk about what actually happened to them, is that, they were supposed to, what happens is they were supposed to be picked back up by Libby's father at 3:15 p.m. And what happened was, obviously, they didn't meet back up with him. And, they get really worried. And, within a couple hours, not even 2 hours, at 5:30 p.m., they're reported missing. And, the families, of course, got out there and like any good families would, started doing the search themselves, even ahead of being reported missing, to try to before they called the police. And police did kind of an initial search, and they didn't find anybody, but they didn't suspect foul play. So I think this is probably the small town thing where you don't really think anything horrible is going to happen. And, you look down under the bridge, they're not there, right? So you say, oh, well, they didn't fall off the bridge. Maybe they got lost. Cell phone range is kind of squirrely in rural areas, and, where there's obstacles. So what happened, though, and this is once again where we don't have a lot of details, it seems like almost intentionally because of the police and what they want to keep close to the vest. The bodies of the girls were found around noon the next day, about half a mile, so 0.8 kilometers, 800 meters east of the abandoned Monon High Bridge. And their bodies were found about 50 feet from the north bank of Deer Creek. They were actually found, this is going to come into play later, they were found on the land of somebody that at one point became a suspect, which we'll briefly mention. But they were found on private land. They weren't found on the actual parkland. So, you know, here's where we got to rewind now. What exactly happened? And this is where we have a big question mark. Now, in the case of John Benet Ramsey, which I think is almost like the classic case of like how things can go wrong in so many ways, what you saw was sometimes when people know too much about the crime, two things. One thing is it helps the person that actually did it. Because if the person who actually did it knows what the cops know, what the police know, it might give them a chance to somehow, you know, like get someone else to lie for them and give them an alibi. It might give them a chance to destroy evidence. It might give them a chance to get out of the country because they realize that like the cops are closing in on them. But and in John Benet's case, you know, what you actually had were liars. You had people that, for whatever reason, wanted to take credit for it, and because they knew enough, you know, now all of us do. All of us know enough of the details that it's actually not too hard for someone to make a plausible lie. And if they were, you know, if it was like there's any possibility they could have done it, it makes it much harder for the cops, for the police to prove that they didn't do it. So this is one of these cases where I think maybe because they've learned from cases like this over the years, the investigators, they're really not letting us know a lot of things. The only things we do know is we have this video, we have the sound clip, and we have a couple of like drawings. So what happened was there's another person who they will not identify to protect that person's identity. Sounds like it was a woman who
It
was
was a
walking.
16-year-old girl, yeah.
16-year-old girl, okay, yep. And she was walking on a bridge that was west of this location. I think if that's north in your
Yeah,
map.
it was the Freedom Bridge.
Freedom Bridge, yeah. So she actually got some kind of, you know, brief look at this person's face. Now, unfortunately, you know, we discussed this before, people's memories are not super reliable. So, I mean, I think we've all learned this the hard way. You can remember something so well, and you know, while you can definitely remember certain things, like the longer amount of time goes between when something happens and when it gets recorded, the more it can change. And things can even change between, like, maybe if this person ever had to testify in a trial, unfortunately, I know that that person's defense attorney, the suspect, will try to tear this person apart on the witness stand because for sure she will have forgotten things. Unless she literally went home and wrote everything down, you know, you're going to forget. So that being said, we have a couple of mugshots. Now, what's confusing is there's two mugshots. They look kind of different, and the one that was released second is apparently the one they made first. So what we're seeing right now with the guy with like the old-timey cabbie hat is the one that they actually made second, and the one they put out to the public first. To wrap your heads around that. And then on top of it, this is Dr. Grande pointed this out, how confusing this was. The police say that the reality, according to the police, is somewhere between these two pictures, if that makes sense. So the real life person that this represents is like a combination of these two, like, drawings. So that's unfortunate because these two drawings are almost of two different people in some ways. I mean, you can kind of see some similarities, but they're like general enough. I mean, like I look like that dude that they're showing right now. Like that, you know, a lot of us do. A lot of people look like the first dude. I mean, it's confusing, and I think that's the other thing that's baffling about that is, you know, if we go back to the video of the guy who's doing it, well, like the police say that this suspect is somewhere between 18 and 40. That guy doesn't look 40 to me. Even though like they say, hey, look, he's walking weird because he's walking over those railroad ties. They're spaced weird. It makes you have a weird gait. That looks like some broken down old man to me. I mean, by broken down old man, I mean somebody like in their, like, I don't know, 50s,
Yeah.
early 60s, who's been smoking his whole life, you know? Like, and here's the thing is, I think this is the part that's amazing to me. There's a concept that some people have called the gray man, you know, like, I tell people that are like defense contractors, or, you know, if you're trying to be inconspicuous, they say, be the gray man, be the guy that doesn't stick out. Well, the crazy part is what this guy is wearing is so much of like the typical, just unnoticeable, inconspicuous outfit for this part of America. And the fact that it hides his figure so well. I mean, you look at him, you can't really tell. Like, does he have a belly? Does he not have a belly? Is he wearing two shirts underneath that jacket? Like, all you can really tell is essentially maybe his, like, you know, his demographic, that he's a man and he's maybe Caucasian. That's like all you can tell. And that, but even what kind of hat he's wearing is in dispute. I mean, I watched a video where somebody, this is probably
Yeah.
something we'll visit in the future. This person did an excellent frame by frame, like brought it into Photoshop, ran a couple of curve tools analyses on it. And this guy had like a whole other thing about what kind of the hat it was, which I agree with, frankly. But at one point, the guy even insinuated that this guy, maybe if he was some kind of crazy serial killer planning something like this to do to somebody, that maybe he even had a certain kind of like, not a GoPro, but like a kind of a camera that was like a GoPro that you would use for like paintballing or something like that. That he was that was on that he got that from the analysis. So
Right.
you know what I mean? It's almost like a Rorschach test where you look at something and you can kind of read
Right.
all of
Right.
your own thoughts and ideas. Yeah. You know, I really think what's interesting about this is the way this person looks and their general appearance. And, you know, look, I think here's the amazing part. And this is, I think, what's going to be so neat when we cover this, or so amazing when we cover this next week. Because next week, what we're really going to do is dive into where the investigation has gone and some of the people who they have looked at as potential suspects for this case. And this is one of those cases where, I mean, we've ran into this before, where, you know, there will be a lot of suspects. And we saw this with D.B. Cooper and cases like that, where we have this laundry list. And, you know, the suspects look really good for it. But this one is even more so. It is friggin' baffling, because every time I look at one of these people on this list of people that we're going to talk about, I mean, I'm like, oh, that's the person. They did it. I mean, they matched the photo, they matched the voice, they matched the suspect drawing, and then, you know, they go and, you know, there's some kind of reason for why. You know, on top of it, they're doing crazy stuff. They're killing people, or they're attacking people on trails, or they're, you know, they've been arrested, they've been to prison, they own the land, whatever it is this person did, you know. And then the next person comes, and you're like, oh my gosh, like how could it, like where does this end where you actually find a definitive suspect? Now, ahead of this, what I would like to say about this case so far, and I think what's been so interesting to me, and here's a couple of things I think make this case so unique. The sound clip and the video. I mean, I don't know that we've ever had a case like this where we actually have a video this close of a suspect. We have their voice on recording. Nobody knows who it is in this 3,000 person town, and we're going to explore why. But nobody seems to have any clue, even after all the people they've talked to and all the questions they've asked. I will say that supposedly the police think that they have talked to, they've talked to so many people, they think they have actually talked to the suspect. They've talked to who they think did it, and they just don't know it. So if that's not spooky, I don't know what it is, that you talk to a murderer. The other thing is, you know, like, as a parent, once again, like the Asha degree thing, it's like, wow, you cannot turn your back for 2 seconds without some awful creepo doing something even in the most innocent of places. I mean, you know, I mean, these aren't even like little children. These are young ladies that are like, you know, I mean, not that far from adulthood. And mind you, one of them was super physically strong. I mean, you can see it in her pictures. She's an athlete. She's about to do softball. You know, she's probably almost the strongest she'll ever be in her life, right? So that's interesting. Now, Dr. Grande, when he covered this, he said it was disturbing to him for the same reason. Now, he said what was scary to him was, this is somebody that woke up that morning and, from what you can tell, didn't plan to kill these two young ladies. Like, he didn't even know about them, right? From what we can tell, unless they were being catfished, which is a possibility we can explore. But assuming they weren't, there's nothing like that ever turned up. this person woke up that morning and then essentially seized an opportunity. Now, I'll disagree with Dr. Grande a little bit because I feel like a person like this, even though Dr. Grande says this is likely an impulsive, disorganized person, and people should kind of notice that in their life, they're not really on top of stuff. But I'll say, I bet you a person like this, just my own opinion, I can differ with Dr. Grande and something, as much as I love him. I love you, Dr. Grande. Look, I feel like someone like this lives for this. So like when that one guy did the analysis and said, this guy's got like a GoPro in his hat, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I kind of think so. Like, I think someone like that, this is his version of hunting. This is hunting territory.
It does look like he has a GoPro. What the hell?
Yeah, on his hat, like he had it mounted. It's like a baseball style cap. It's like a camo baseball style cap. And I think this is what this other guy said. And you look, by the way, everybody, even like Libby's grandfather in the press conferences, he's like bow hunting. He's wearing hunting stuff. Everybody there wears camo and all this outdoorsy stuff all the time because they're living in a rural area. They're hunting half the time. They're just wearing like the kind of clothes that are made to be outdoors and warm weather. So that's what I think this guy's got going on. But I think, look, some people get ready for deer hunting season. I think this guy got ready for people hunting season.
Wow.
And that's why, and that's why maybe some of the other things, I'm not going to be explicit, but some of the other things you would associate with like an attack like this didn't happen because I don't think this person was into, let's call it gratification of other things. I think his gratification was like the kill. That was how he was getting his thrills. And I think that, look, when someone wakes up that morning to go deer hunting, they don't know what deer they're going to get, right? There's a lot of deer out there. But he was planning to kill a human. And that's something he got two instead. So that's something to think about. And then the other thing is like in terms of just kind of impressions going into this about suspects, when I look at this, I see a constellation of physical things about this person. Like his posture doesn't really look like a young person, a young guy. It looks like kind of an older guy. Something about his face and his mannerisms. He looks kind of worn down. It looks like somebody who's had a good couple of decades of life wearing on his frame and maybe isn't like super physically fit, but maybe is like, old guy strong or something, or fat strong.
Right.
Does it look like he's got a fanny pack, by the way?
Yeah.
In the front of his thing?
What?
Like, okay. So nobody under 50 has a fanny pack. So that's the other part of it, unless they're just, I don't know. They're just unconventional. And that coat doesn't look like that. Like kind
One
of
thing
blazer
to mention also, obviously we're not going to get into all of this, a lot of these details this week. We're sort of leaving that for the next week's episode. But I will say I've read some reports that, as you've mentioned earlier, it was a super warm winter day, and a lot of people sort of state that he's definitely overdressed for the occasion. He looks like he's taking a stroll down the Red Square in early like January. He doesn't look like he's walking in February on a warm day in Indiana.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you're right. It's like it always was like he was trying to kind of hunker down, or he's in such bad shape that he can't even be confident that he's going to get his heart rate up enough to like break a sweat to like get hot in those clothing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. I mean, so I'd like to offer our viewers this week a challenge. So here's the challenge: is next week we are coming back to this case for part 2. And we're going to come back with a list of people, a list of names of people that have been looked at, and frankly, some of them have been exonerated. And not just a list of people, but even a list of types of people who would do this, list of reasons, a list of circumstances for how this might happen. And, I think we can really put our faith in our fan base to meet the challenge. Is that when we do the episode next week, I'd really like you to compare your list and your findings and your research. And by you, I mean, the listener and the viewer. Compare what you found out about this case to what we found out about this case and see if you come to the same conclusions about what we found. Because the amount of knowledge out there, like I said, even today, Dr. Grande rang in. And, I think that was pretty fascinating. But I think even when, a Dr. Grande or someone like that, some expert rings in, doesn't mean they're right, doesn't mean you agree. So I will be really curious to see how this episode resonates with those viewers and how well received our analysis and our research is on next week's episode when we revisit this topic.
Exactly. So, for this week's episode, for episode number 75, we sort of wanted to do a little lead in into the case because we did know that this case, could potentially generate a lot of interest. And we definitely wanted to do a little bit of a different, I would say, structure to these podcasts regarding the Delphi murders case. So next week we're definitely jumping into the details, I guess the theories. I have a few perspectives that I want to share with everyone regarding why I think this was a crazy case. And as Glenn mentioned, Glenn talked a little bit about uh, he he said that he would sort of want to describe next week the actual perpetrator, who he was, like psychologically, who would do that kind of a thing. Well, on my end, I definitely want to talk a little bit about what his MO was, what his plan was for the murders, because I do have a sort of a theory in my head of what this guy was looking for when he went to the trail. We're also gonna discuss, I guess, the other crazy theories that are out there that are floating around on the internet. So yeah, guys, this was definitely a little bit more of a non-usual episode, but a case like the Delphi murders deserves special treatment in our opinions. And next week we're going back here and we're gonna do like this whole grand show about this case. So thank you for joining us this week, guys. Next week, as I've said, stay tuned. As Glenn mentioned, he gave you an excellent challenge to look into this case and see if your findings match ours. And definitely in the comment sections, leave your thoughts about this case, because I'm sure we will be looking through the comments and seeing what you guys think. And then next week, join us as we delve deeper into the mysterious Delphi murder case. So, thank you guys for joining us and stay safe and peace out.